Zach and Madeline call themselves Taylor Swift experts. They say they are fans, fine. Expertise should mean knowing the difference between a fact, an inference, a theory, and a punchline. What happens in these clips is different. A public fact appears, the private part is missing. They fill that missing space with the most hostile explanation available, then use their own invention as proof that Taylor is cruel, manipulative, passive-aggressive, or evil. That is the issue, but if the evidence ends, the accusation has to end with it. You do not get to manufacture the missing scene and then cite the scene you manufactured. So the test is simple. We will play everything needed from the 4 strongest clips. We will not hide their qualifiers. We will not pretend obvious jokes are sworn testimony. We will concede every criticism the public record can support. Then we will stop exactly where their evidence stops and look at how far they keep walking.
But of course she was rejected. And this was in Journey to Fearless. This is where I got this little tidbit. She was used to rejection by that point. And she tells a story in Journey to Fearless about asking all her friends to go to the mall. All of them say no, they're busy. My mom won't let me. So she asks her mom to take her to the mall. And who do they see at the mall? All of Taylor's so-called friends hanging out without her. She truly was a loser.
Bitches.
She was a fucking loser.
Let us make sure we understand the setup. Taylor says she invited her friends to the mall. They all said they were busy. Her mother took her anyway, and she found those same friends hanging out without her. That is not an allegation Zach and Madeline had to investigate. It is the story they chose to discuss. A child realizes her friends lied because they did not want her there. Madeline's response is, she truly was a loser. She was a fucking loser. Maybe somebody hears that and says, it is dark humor. They are laughing at the dramatic way Taylor tells her origin story. Okay, that is the strongest defense. I'm not going to pretend a podcast joke is a criminal confession, but a joke still has a target and a premise. The target here is not a corporation, a misleading documentary edit, or a billionaire's marketing campaign. The target is the child in the story who was deliberately excluded. The premise is that the exclusion confirms she really was a loser. That is why we were joking does not finish the conversation. It only identifies the format. It does not explain what the joke adds. If somebody tells you that classmates humiliated them, and your punchline is that the classmates had the right idea, you're not exposing a contradiction, you're volunteering for the classmates' side. They do not produce another account from a friend. They do not identify a contradiction in the timeline. They do not say the mall story is false. They accept the story and use it as an opportunity to call her a loser again. That is not fact-checking. It is heckling with a bibliography open somewhere off screen.
She said during this time she was doing everything she could.
That's what you need to understand about her.
She was a fucking loser. I believe it too. She said she was doing everything she could to quote unquote fit in, down to straightening her hair, and she'd be terrified of her friends or schoolmates reading something in the paper about, for example, her performing the national anthem, because the kids at school would torment her about it and make fun of her. I believe that hook, line, and sinker. In Pennsylvania, oh yeah, I would make fun of that dumb little bitch and her little headband and her shiny American flag.
Now the story becomes more specific. Taylor says she tried to fit in. She straightened her hair. She worried classmates would find newspaper coverage of her singing the national anthem and torment her for it. Madeline says she would make fun of that dumb little bitch, her headband, and her shiny American flag. Again, the defense is obvious. Exaggeration, banter, a joke about middle school social rules. Zach even explains that drawing attention to yourself in middle school gets punished.
Well, yes.
Their white pants.
Well, yes. In middle school, you cannot draw attention to yourself. You can't. And even if you don't, you're going to get made fun of.
Yep.
So going on TV and saying, God bless America, I mean, firing squad, you're lining yourself up for it.
You should die. And she did. She died every day in school for a year
she
straight.
Hated it. And it was the founding wrong.
There it is. Going on TV and saying God bless America becomes firing squad. You're lining yourself up for it. Then you should die. Obviously, nobody reasonably hears that as a literal instruction delivered to Taylor in the present. It is hyperbole inside a comedy discussion. We can acknowledge that without pretending it becomes insightful. Ask the basic question, what is the joke doing? It is taking the logic of school bullying, stand out, and you deserve punishment, and making that logic more extreme for entertainment. Taylor's account is that classmates made ordinary life feel socially dangerous. Zach and Madeline's bit is that she did, in fact, deserve the social firing squad because she was conspicuous and embarrassing. Most importantly, none of those possible critiques require calling the child a little bitch or saying she should die. Those lines are not evidence supporting a critique. They are the product being sold. And that product is contempt. The pleasure of treating one person as uniquely eligible for cruelty while calling the cruelty sophistication.
Directly interpolates New Year's Day as a sample. And I feel like, when you're going through being compared all the time and having writing credits kind of tacked on where maybe they don't deserve to be, the smart thing to do would probably have been to leave that song off the album. But again, I think Olivia was naive and young and didn't really understand what she was doing. Olivia and her co-writer definitely lost millions of dollars in royalties when Taylor and Jack were given credits for that song retroactively in July of 2021.
Start with what is public. Olivia Rodrigo spoke openly about musical influences. Deja Vu later added writing credits for Taylor Swift, Jack Antonoff, and St. Vincent. Songwriting credits normally carry a share of publishing income. That change happened after the song was already successful. Those facts are fair to discuss. You can think the similarity did not justify credit, that young artists can be pressured into giving up ownership, or that interpolation rules are inconsistent and opportunistic. Zach says Olivia and Dan Nigro definitely lost millions of dollars. Definitely, where's the accounting? The public knows credits changed. Public reporting discussed the possibility of substantial royalties. That is not the contract, split sheet, payment history, settlement terms, or either writer's tax return. Millions may be plausible. Plausible is not definite. Variety said a quiet behind-the-scenes settlement seems likely. That is a responsible inference, not proof Taylor personally issued a demand.
That was 2 or 3 months later after the fact. Dan, her producer, has kind of made some sort of vague allusions to the way in which that credit taking happened. He kind of indirectly suggested that once something becomes successful, suddenly people want a piece of it. Before, it's clap, clap, how cute, what a sweet little girl writing her sweet little songs. Then when the song is a huge success, when the song is a viral moment, then suddenly it's, I want a piece of that. I want to show you that you're not going to get away without citing your references if I believe you have used me as a reference.
This is the cleanest example of how a suggestive comment becomes a completed accusation. Zach accurately describes Dan Nigro's remarks as vague and indirect. Those are his own words, vague allusions, indirectly suggestive. If Dan had said, Taylor personally contacted us after the song became successful and demanded credit, that would be evidence of Taylor doing exactly that. He did not say it in the material Zach presents. An indirect remark about people becomes a direct motive assigned to one specific person. This is where a strong reaction argument pauses, not because the interpretation is impossible, because the interpretation is being sold at a confidence level the receipt does not support. There is a huge difference between this comment makes me suspect the credit request came after success and this proves Taylor saw a hit and decided to take money from a teenager. The first is an inference. The second is a story about motive.
What I don't really understand is the obvious behind-the-scenes push that happened between the labels, and obviously Taylor manages her entire career. She doesn't have a management team. She has a kind of a group of advisors, I suppose, that help her make decisions. So any kind of outreach or communication that is done from Taylor's camp to someone else's camp is coming directly from Taylor herself, because there is no person that is above her that's making decisions on her behalf. And I don't understand why Taylor either pursued getting these credits or accepted them in the first place.
Here, the argument finally contradicts itself in real time. First, the behind-the-scenes push is obvious. Then Zach says Taylor manages her entire career, has advisors rather than a conventional manager, and therefore communication from Taylor's camp comes directly from Taylor herself. That conclusion does not follow. Final authority is not personal authorship of every publishing communication. Lawyers, publishers, labels, advisors, and rights administrators all communicate. Taylor runs her career is not a receipt showing Taylor gave this instruction. Then he says he does not understand why Taylor either pursued getting these credits or accepted them. Stop there. Pursuing a credit and accepting a credit are different actions. One version says Taylor or her representatives initiated a claim and sought ownership. The other says another party offered credit and Taylor did not refuse it. The moral and factual questions are different. Zach puts both possibilities in the same sentence because he does not know which happened. That admission should reduce certainty. Instead, it functions like a trap with two doors. Whichever private scenario occurred, Taylor is guilty. If she pursued the credit, she bullied Olivia. If she merely accepted it, she should have rejected the money. If no public statement exists, the silence is passive aggression. There is no possible behavior inside the unknown facts that could interrupt the verdict. That is not analysis responding to evidence. It is a verdict looking for a route. The missing facts are not minor details, they are the entire accusation.
If, in fact, she was just given these credits out of the goodness of her heart and Olivia really felt like she wanted to share these royalties with Taylor, I think a cool thing to do maybe would have been to comment on it publicly and be like, I don't really understand why I needed to share credits on this, but I appreciate Olivia citing her references and I think it's a really great song. This is effectively what Hayley Williams from Paramore did when she was given credits for Good For You. In fact, she didn't even want to be credited on that song and she didn't see that there was a direct influence, so much so that she deserved to receive royalties from it, and I think that Taylor could have handled it in a very similar way.
Now, Zach builds a second standard, even if Olivia voluntarily gave credit. He says Taylor should have publicly rejected it, praised Olivia, and handled it like Hayley Williams supposedly handled the separate Good For You credit. Prefer that response if you like, but another artist's different response to a different composition. Publisher, lawyer, and agreement is not evidence of what happened here. It is a preference, not motive. Silence is especially useful for this style of commentary because silence contains no words that can contradict the narrator. You can pour any motive into it. Taylor did not publicly explain the credit arrangement. That is a fact. Taylor remained silent because she wanted to punish Olivia is a theory. Taylor remained silent because lawyers advised it, because both teams agreed not to comment, because she considered it routine publishing business, because she wanted to avoid escalating attention, or because she simply did not care to discuss it are also theories. The public evidence presented here does not select among them. An expert says the silence leaves motive unknown. A shit talker says the silence proves whichever motive creates the better roast. And the phrase on purpose she didn't do that sounds meaningful while proving almost nothing. Of course, not making a statement is at some level a choice. The disputed question is why intent cannot be extracted from an empty microphone.
But on purpose, she didn't do that. And I think that this is very telling. A lot of the time with Taylor Swift, when you're studying her career and you're studying the moves that she's made over time, you have to read between the lines and look more at what is not said rather than what is said. At the end of the day, accepting those writing credits just really struck me as taking candy from a baby. What's the point? You don't need a couple million more dollars. You already have everything that you could ever want from the music industry. There is no real need to punch down in that sense. And that's really how I interpreted this turn of events, especially seeing as how Taylor has literally not referenced Olivia Rodrigo since. Something else, and kind of like an act of passive aggression, Taylor is the queen of passive aggression, whether you want to believe it or not. Check out The Evolution of a Snake and listen to our back half.
This final beat says the method out loud when studying Taylor's career. Zach says you have to read between the lines and look at what is not said rather than what is said. Sometimes context does live between the lines. Patterns, incentives, and omissions matter. Good analysis is not limited to press releases, but reading between the lines is not permission to replace the lines. A useful inference has to explain why one interpretation fits observable evidence better than alternatives. Zach does not compare alternatives. He chooses the one where Taylor takes candy from a baby, punches down, and performs passive aggression. The credit becomes proof of greed because Taylor already has money. The lack of a public statement becomes proof of hostility. The lack of later Olivia references becomes another clue. But none of those facts identifies who initiated the credit request. We have traveled for 2.5 minutes around the central hole without filling it. The candy metaphor also does emotional work that the financial record cannot. Olivia becomes a baby, Taylor becomes the adult stealing sweets. Once the audience accepts that image, asking for a contract sounds cold because who requests paperwork while watching a baby get robbed? That is why loaded metaphors need receipts underneath them. Calling something punching down can be fair when a powerful person targets somebody with less power. Taylor had vastly more industry power than Olivia. That imbalance deserves attention. But power imbalance does not prove the powerful person performed the disputed act. It changes how we judge an act after establishing it. It cannot establish the act for us. Likewise, Taylor not referencing Olivia afterward may suggest distance. It could be awkwardness, legal caution, personal dislike, indifference, or nothing deliberate. It does not prove passive aggression. Queen of passive aggression, whether you want to believe it or not, closes the loop perfectly. Taylor's supposed character is offered as proof of the motive. The inferred motive is then offered as another example of her character. How do we know this silence was passive aggression? Because Taylor is the queen of passive aggression. How do we know she is the queen? Look at this silence, that is circular. Here is the complete supported statement. Credits were added to Deja Vu after release. Those credits ordinarily carry royalties, public reporting considered a private settlement likely, and the parties did not publicly disclose the negotiation. Here's the unsupported edition. Taylor personally waited for success, ordered the push, took millions she did not need, punched down and then withheld Olivia's name as punishment. You can oppose the credit outcome without pretending the second paragraph is contained inside the first. That is why this is the strongest expert clip. Zach has facts, he has relevant industry context, he even identifies his uncertainty. Then instead of respecting that uncertainty, he fills every gap with the version that makes Taylor look worst. He sounds certain because certainty is the performance, the expertise ends at the credit change. The shit-talking begins where the private negotiation should be.
And I think we all need to remember that the person who started this and carried it on publicly was Taylor Swift. She is the aggressor the entire way through this feud, at least in public. Who knows what went on behind closed doors? But she is learning that she can use her star power for evil here. Okay, she started it with Camila.
This clip gives us the disclaimer and the accusation in one breath. Taylor was the public aggressor, they say. Then who knows what went on behind closed doors? Then she is learning she can use her star power for evil. The qualifier is correct. We do not know everything that happened behind closed doors. That should narrow the claim. Instead, it works like a tiny legal disclaimer before the private verdict continues unchanged. There's enough public material to criticize Taylor in the Katy Perry feud. Taylor discussed a conflict in a major magazine while promoting 1989. She framed bad blood around another female artist and a business dispute. The public quickly connected it to Katy. The song and video turned private hostility into a giant pop culture event. You can argue Taylor had more power, controlled the narrative, and benefited from presenting herself as wronged. That is a coherent criticism. Using star power for evil is not needed to make it. If the known public behavior is enough, describe it precisely. If the judgment depends on hidden behavior, admit the judgment cannot be settled. You cannot use uncertainty as atmosphere and certainty as the conclusion.
Lapel, and this was a next level campaign. The Tay voodoo. We love it when she turns her influence against worthy targets, but it can be hard to watch when she starts punching down. So of course it all began with a cover story, a fake news interpretation of what she was really mad about. Taylor tells Rolling Stone that Katy did something so horrible. Quote, I was like, oh, we're just straight up enemies. It had to do with business. You'd think she was sabotaging her contract or selling her life's work to Scooter Braun, but no. She wanted us to believe that Katy Perry was dead forever because of some replaceable backup dancers. Nice try.
Now we get a mix of fair criticism and loaded reconstruction. They call it a next-level campaign. They say it is difficult when Taylor punches down. They describe her public account as a fake news interpretation and reduce the dispute to replaceable backup dancers. There is a real proportionality argument here. Taylor's platform was enormous. Bad Blood became a hit with a blockbuster video. Katy's alleged conduct involved dancers leaving or being recruited during a tour dispute. Turning that conflict into a cultural campaign could be viewed as excessive. That criticism does not require Taylor to be innocent. It asks whether the response was proportionate and whether a more powerful celebrity shaped public perception unfairly. Good, make that case. But fake news claims the public account was false, not merely incomplete or self-serving. What evidence establishes that Taylor's underlying complaint was fabricated? Katy later gave her own account and said the dispute involved dancers who had previously worked with her and wanted to return. That context can make Taylor's framing look dramatic. It does not mean Taylor experienced no business disruption or believed nothing had been done to her tour. Two people can describe the same conflict differently without one account being invented from nothing. The phrase replaceable backup dancers also performs a convenient trick. It minimizes the workers and the operational issue to maximize the absurdity of Taylor's response. If dancers are replaceable, why treat their choices as decisive proof about either celebrity's character? Either the staffing issue mattered enough to explain the dispute, or it was trivial enough that it cannot carry the moral story being built on top of it. Again, the strongest argument is available. Taylor used a huge media machine to frame a relatively ordinary industry conflict as betrayal. That is specific. It is testable against the scale of the response. Calling the account fake and Taylor evil adds certainty about deception and motive that the public timeline cannot fully establish. And look at how punching down is used. Taylor's greater power is real. Power should affect our scrutiny, but unequal power does not make every claim by the stronger person false. It means we should ask whether she used that power responsibly. That question is enough. The loaded language keeps trying to answer more than the receipts can.
Try. Katy took some pot shots back at Taylor on Twitter, but she was really at a disadvantage because she was taking a break from music at this time. Like, she wasn't in the public eye. Taylor, of course, is at the height of her powers, and she chooses to strike when Katy's out of the game. Also her attempts at clapbacks were, of course, humiliating, far too late, swish, swish, bish, and way after the fact. Though she did absolutely assist Nicki Minaj, as we discussed, in temporarily silencing Taylor. Finding it hard to parade the pit women against each other women as one immeasurably capitalizes on the takedown of another. And she was making a convoluted, indecipherable point. Regina George in sheep's clothing, and where was the lie? I'm not seeing the lie. From Katy Perry's perspective, it's true. So
this beat is closer to ordinary commentary. They argue Katy was at a disadvantage. Taylor was at the height of her power. Katy's clapbacks were late and ineffective, and Katy's perspective contained truth. Much of that is opinion supported by visible public events. Taylor had extraordinary cultural momentum. Katy's response did not control the narrative in the same way. Swish Swish did not reverse the public framing. People can reasonably judge the feud through that imbalance. This is what the rest of the video could have been. Identify the public acts, compare reach and timing. Explain why one response had more impact, and make a judgment. Even the Spotify timing is fair to raise. Taylor's catalog returned to Spotify the day Katy released Witness. People interpreted that as shade or a competitive move. It looked pointed. But looking pointed and proving a private sabotage plan are different claims. A careful critic can say, "The timing appears petty to me." That is an opinion tied to an observable date. A careless critic says, "The timing reveals a complete private strategy," then uses the inferred strategy to prove Taylor's permanent character. The difference is not softness. The careful version can still be brutal. It is simply accurate about what is known. There is the date, there is the impact. I think that was petty. Done. No mind reading required. This is the useful part of the clip because it demonstrates that Zach and Madeline are capable of making an evidence-based power argument. They understand public positioning. They understand relative career momentum. They can explain why Katy looked weaker. Then the next beat leaves that solid ground and announces a private manipulation as fact.
It went on for a very long time, and Taylor eventually manipulated Katy Perry into apologizing to her. Katy Perry had to send Taylor Swift an olive branch. And Taylor definitely milked this personal drama to help promote 1989. And I think of this very differently in hindsight. She wasn't willing to engage in the usual guess which boy this song is about line of intrigue.
Taylor eventually manipulated Katy Perry into apologizing to her. That is the claim. What in the preceding clip proves manipulation? Katy publicly said she forgave Taylor and was sorry for anything she had done. She later sent an olive branch. Taylor publicly acknowledged it. Those events show reconciliation efforts. They do not reveal the private mechanism that produced them. Katy may have wanted peace. She may have regretted her role. Her team may have wanted the feud gone. Taylor's team may have set conditions. Friends may have mediated. Public pressure may have exhausted both of them. Several motives can exist together. Manipulated selects one motive and one power relationship without presenting a source from either participant. It also quietly removes Katy's agency. The commentary is supposedly sympathetic to Katy because Taylor had greater power. But sympathy becomes a story where Katy cannot decide to apologize, de-escalate, or send a symbolic gesture on her own. If she did it, Taylor must have engineered it. That is not automatically feminist or protective. It is another way of turning a woman into a prop and a Taylor character theory. If Katy said, "Taylor threatened me until I apologized," play that quote. If reporting identified a coercive demand, cite it. If the evidence is simply that the less powerful person offered an olive branch, manipulation is not established. Reconciliation often involves the person who feels less invested making the first visible move. That can be unfair. It can reflect unequal power. It can also be a strategic choice made with full agency. The public outcome alone cannot tell us which. And remember the disclaimer at the start. Who knows what went on behind closed doors? Exactly. They knew the boundary, they stated the boundary. Then they walked through it and described Taylor manipulating Katy like a camera had been in the room. That is why this clip is stronger than a generic evil montage. The uncertainty is not something critics are imposing afterward. Zach voices it himself. The sequence is who knows, evil, fake news, punching down, manipulation. The disclaimer does no analytical work. It does not reduce confidence, preserve alternatives, or change the conclusion. It merely gives uncertainty 2 seconds of airtime before the story resumes. A real qualifier changes the sentence after it. We do not know what happened privately, so I'm limiting my criticism to Taylor's public escalation and disproportionate platform. That would be coherent. We do not know what happened privately, but she used her power for evil and manipulated Katy is not caution. It is decoration. The fair conclusion is already strong. Taylor publicly escalated a petty feud, benefited from greater power, and may have timed business decisions to make a point. People can dislike that without apology. The unsupported conclusion is that she privately coerced Katy's reconciliation. One is criticism, the other is fan fiction with a villain edit.
I want to wear my anti-hero dress. I don't want my anti-hero knit polo. Why? Because Zara can probably do it better. Yeah, they have better designers. They have better resources to execute this. I mean, we all know that it's all created by Vietnamese children, but like, come on now.
That line is short, but the allegation is not small. We all know that it is all created by Vietnamese children. No, we do not all know that. The clip names no factory, supplier, worker, investigation, audit, customs record, lawsuit, or report. It does not distinguish Taylor's merchandise company from a licensee, vendor, manufacturer, or retailer. It does not identify a product. It says all of it is created by Vietnamese children as if this were common knowledge. This is not like calling a celebrity petty child labor is a factual allegation about real supply chains and real workers. It could be investigated, it could be true in a specific facility, it could be false. The way to find out is evidence. If Zach has reporting, show it. Name the supplier, identify the factory, link the labor investigation, quote the worker testimony, explain which merchandise was traced there, and when nothing in the retained clip does that. The surrounding point about merchandise quality is fair. Fast fashion retailers may produce better-looking clothing than celebrity merchandise. Fans frequently complain about price, materials, inconsistent sizing, delayed shipping, and designs that feel cheap relative to the artist's wealth. That criticism does not need child labor as garnish. You can hold up the product, show the stitching, compare the fabric, quote the price, and roast the design for 10 minutes. Those are receipts the viewer can see. Instead, the clip jumps from Zara having better resources to a universal allegation about Vietnamese children. Maybe the defense is that this is a cynical joke about global apparel manufacturing. Fine. Then the joke still relies on presenting child labor as an assumed fact about these products without evidence. Hyperbole can exaggerate a supported premise. It cannot create the premise from nothing. If I say a late package took 1,000 years to arrive, nobody thinks I measured a millennium. There is still a real late package underneath the exaggeration. What verified child labor finding sits underneath this line? The clip does not provide one. Current Universal Music Group and Bravado materials say suppliers must comply with labor standards, and that social compliance audits are part of the program. UMG's statement for the financial year ending in 2025 says its site visits identified no evidence of child labor. That does not prove every factory has always complied. Corporate policies are not magic. Audits can miss abuse. Supply chains can be opaque. A current statement cannot settle every historical question, but it is evidence that can be evaluated. It names a policy, a responsible corporate structure, and an audit claim. Zach's line offers nothing comparable. A strong critic would use the corporate statement as the beginning, not the end. Which suppliers were audited? How were visits selected? Were they announced? What regions and tiers of subcontracting were covered? Did the audit reach raw material facilities or only direct suppliers? Those questions could expose a real gap. We all know Vietnamese children made all of it exposes only a willingness to substitute stereotype and certainty for investigation. Vietnam is a country with a massive manufacturing sector and millions of adult workers. Dropping Vietnamese children as shorthand for cheap production treats an entire workforce as a punchline while pretending to care about labor exploitation. If the concern is workers, center workers. If the concern is evidence, bring evidence. If the concern is just making Taylor's merch sound morally filthy, then say that is the bit. This is where the expert persona becomes especially hollow. Expertise is not confidence. It is not saying we all know before a claim nobody has established. Expertise is knowing what source would be required and refusing to overstate what you have. There are levels to a responsible claim. The merch looks cheap is a visible opinion. I worry the supply chain may contain labor abuses is a concern that invites investigation. An investigation found child labor at this named supplier is a factual report. All of it is created by Vietnamese children is the most sweeping version with the least support. That inversion is the pattern of the entire video. The certainty rises as the evidence disappears. And because the line is tossed away quickly, the audience is encouraged not to examine it. The allegation supplies moral disgust. Then the conversation moves on before anybody asks for a link. That is how unsupported claims become atmosphere. Repeat them casually enough and we all know starts to sound like a citation. It is not 4 clips, 4 different subjects, the same method. In the bullying clip, there is barely a factual argument at all. Taylor describes exclusion, and they use the description as a new opportunity to call her a loser, a little bitch, and say she should die. The defense is comedy. We granted it. The comedy still consists of reenacting the cruelty and siding with it. In the Olivia clip, there is a real credit dispute and a serious industry issue. Zach has enough information to ask strong questions. Then he converts vague, indirect, and seems likely into an obvious personal order from Taylor. He admits he does not know whether she pursued the credits or accepted them. Instead of stopping, he makes both unknown possibilities evidence against her. In the Katy clip, they explicitly say nobody knows what happened behind closed doors. Then they say Taylor used power for evil and manipulated Katy into apologizing. The qualifier and accusation cannot both carry the confidence they give them. In the merch clip, a serious child labor allegation arrives with no supplier, factory, worker, product investigation, or audit. We all know is expected to replace all 6. That is the pattern. Cruelty becomes a joke, inference becomes reporting. Uncertainty becomes a dramatic pause. A sweeping factual allegation becomes a throwaway. And every road ends at the same character verdict. Taylor is not merely wrong. She is the kind of person who would do the worst hidden thing available. That is why ordinary corrections never resolve this style of commentary. The argument is not built forward from evidence. It is built backward from identity. Taylor is controlling, so silence is passive aggression. Taylor is greedy, so accepting a credit proves she targeted a teenager. Taylor is evil, so Katy's olive branch proves manipulation. Taylor deserves contempt, so a childhood bullying story becomes an invitation to bully her again. The label explains the event, and the event proves the label. That circle can run forever without receiving new information. An expert breaks the circle. An expert says the added credits are documented, the initiation and negotiation are not public. An expert says Taylor publicly escalated the Katy feud. Katy's private reason for apologizing is not established. An expert says the merch quality can be judged directly. A child labor claim requires supply chain evidence. An expert can still be funny. An expert can be harsh. An expert can say Taylor behaved badly. Precision does not make criticism weak. Precision makes it harder to dismiss. If Taylor publicly weaponized a feud, show the public acts. If a lyric is misogynistic, quote the lyric. If a product is overpriced, compare the product and price. If a rights dispute transferred money, show the documented transfer and distinguish estimates from record. The roast gets stronger when the receipt survives it. What weakens a roast is pretending the setup proved something it never proved. Then the target can ignore the valid criticism and point to the invented part. These 4 are enough. They show open contempt, a detailed private story built from acknowledged uncertainty, a disclaimer immediately abandoned, and a major factual allegation without a source. No one has to love Taylor Swift to see the problem. This is not a demand that commentary become a courtroom. Podcasts can speculate, people can theorize, fans can gossip, just label the product honestly. Say, this is my theory. Say, I do not know. Say, the timing looks suspicious to me. Say, I'm exaggerating because I think it is funny. Do not call the hidden act obvious when your own source is vague. Do not call private manipulation a fact after saying nobody knows what happened privately. Do not call child labor common knowledge when you brought no evidence. And do not hide straightforward contempt behind the idea that memorizing somebody's career makes every insult analytical. Knowing every release date does not mean you know what happened in a private legal discussion. Knowing who sent an olive branch does not mean you know why she sent it. Knowing merchandise can be cheap does not mean you know which workers made every item. Knowing Taylor later became famous does not make the children who excluded her correct. Those boundaries are not complicated. Zach and Madeline cross them because the worst possible interpretation is more entertaining than the honest one. The honest Olivia answer is, credits changed, a settlement seems likely, initiation terms and personal instructions remain private. The entertaining answer is Taylor waited for a teenager to succeed, took millions, punched down and punished her with silence. The honest Katy answer is Taylor publicly escalated a petty feud from a position of greater power. Both women later reconciled. Private motives remain unknown. The entertaining answer is Taylor used star power for evil and manipulated Katy into surrendering. The honest merch answer is the products can be criticized. Supply chain abuse is possible and deserves investigation. This clip proves no child labor claim. The entertaining answer is Vietnamese children made all of it. Obviously, entertainment wins every time, and the expert label is used to make the entertainment sound sourced. That is not expertise. That is shit-talking with footnotes. They decide who Taylor is first, then every credit, apology, silence, and childhood memory is forced into that answer. If every story ends with the same villain, regardless of what is known, unknown, public, private, literal, or joking, the clips may not be revealing Taylor's character. They may be revealing the speaker's investment in hating her.